If there are any surprises in the gaming scene this year, Black Myth: Wukong is definitely on that list. If there's one downside, it's that the model peripherals are so popular they're completely out of stock. As someone who's already put in 270 hours in just 2 weeks, I'm dying to get my hands on a Wukong model. If I can't buy one, I'll just make it myself. The first challenge in making the model is that there's no pre-made Wukong available. Lucky for me, I found one really impressive online that captures Wukong in his Yanhuo suit, holding his Kun stick. This model has been simplified a bit compared to how it looks in the game, but it's still great for a small-scale version. The actual print turned out pretty well, and you've got the option of having him wear a mask or not. Alright, the character model is all set. I'll tackle the coloring first before working on the scene. This Wukong model is decked out in a Yanhuo suit, which can be interpreted as being obsessed with flames. The name, Yanhua, from an ancient Chinese myth about creatures that resemble monkeys, capable of swallowing coal and spitting out flames. As for the costume itself, while it may not be as grand or opulent as the Monkey King set, the finer details are really eye-catching. The subtle cloud patterns on the blue outer shirt and the Chinese dragon design on the back give the overall look a unique charm. I'll be recreating the entire model's color scheme to match the game's original look. The armor is also quite unique, crafted in a flame-like design. The mask of this costume resembles a yaksha. Yaksha comes from India, where they were originally malevolent spirits that devoured people, but later became Dharma protectors in Buddhism after being enlightened by the Buddha. Interestingly, the story of the yaksha is quite similar to that of the Red Boy in the 5th chapter of Black Myth. Red Boy is a fire-wielding monster in Chinese mythology. Known for his evil deeds and habit of devouring people, he becomes a tricky obstacle for Tang Monk on his quest for the Buddhist scriptures. Eventually, Guanyin Bodhisattva steps in, subdues him, and takes him on as both a servant and a disciple. His story is famously featured in Journey to the West. I have to say, in Black Myth, every detail in the scenes and characters showcases their dedication and embodies ultimate Chinese aesthetics. It's not just about the fun of playing, it's a true feast for the eyes. Players have a ton of options when it comes to suits and weapons in the game, and each one is a classic. Even the little props, like gourds, are packed with creativity and clever design. The destined hero is ready. And now it's time to create a scene that complements the character. In Black Myth, Chinese Buddhist culture runs through the entire storyline. Alongside the awe-inspiring temples, the game also features numerous cave temples. Sharp-eyed players will notice hidden wild corners and subtle Buddha statues tucked into caves. So, for this project, I'll be crafting a platform with caves as the backdrop. The base material for the cliff cave is high-density XPS foam boards. For the mountain image, I took inspiration from Ziyun Mountain and Huanghua Temple in the 5th chapter of Black Myth. I made a few adjustments to make the overall composition more cohesive and streamlined. The scenery in Black Myth is based on real historical relics and natural landscapes in China. Relics influence the design of the grottos in Sichuan, while the mountain's shape draws from the striking formations of Zhangjiajie. The Buddha looks like this. Instead of printing one, I ended up purchasing a Guanyin Bodhisattva statue online. I think it is made of concrete. This particular style was popular in northern China during the Northern Song Dynasty, between the 10th and 12th centuries, which aligns with the era portrayed in the game. The concept of caves in religious art originally came from Indian religious traditions. Buddhism first arrived in China during the 1st century AD. introduced from regions that are now Pakistan and Afghanistan, historically known as Gandhara. Initially, Buddhism was not widely accepted in China and was often dismissed as a form of Western alchemy or esoteric practice. It wasn't until the 5th century AD, amid widespread civil wars that shook traditional beliefs, that Buddhism began to gain significant traction in China. During this time, Chinese Buddhist art largely adopted the Gandhara style, which blended Hellenistic and Indian influences. In the 7th century AD, following over 200 years of civil war, China was unified under the powerful Tang dynasty. This period also marked major reforms in Buddhism. By then, Chinese Buddhism had splintered into various schools, each with its interpretations and teachings, leading to confusion and even contradictions in the religious texts. To resolve these theological disputes, a monk named Xuanzang embarked on a journey to India in search of the original Buddhist scriptures. His quest aimed to clarify the teachings and bring harmony to the fragmented Buddhist community in China. After 14 years of travel and study, Xuanzang gained immense respect in India. Many Indian princes invited him to stay as a state teacher, but he was determined to return to China with the sacred texts. In 645 AD, when Xuanzang arrived back in Chang'an, the capital of the Tang dynasty, he brought with him 657 Buddhist scriptures. The Tang Emperor personally welcomed him and built a grand temple in his honor, now known as the Big Wild Goose Pagoda. It was there that Xuanzang translated the scriptures he had brought from India and penned his famous travelogue, The Records of the Western Regions of the Great Tang Dynasty. Xuanzang's epic journey later became the inspiration for many novels and plays over the next 1,500 years. The most famous of these is Journey to the West, which forms the basis for black myth Wukong. The choice of the Buddha statue's shape is also based on these backgrounds. By that time, Chinese Buddhism had already become localized, and the Bodhisattva's depiction had evolved from an early male form to a more androgynous, gender-neutral one. A bodhisattva is understood as a divine being who willingly remains in the world to help save all living beings. Guanyin is one of the most revered in Chinese Buddhism, symbolizing compassion. Depending on the scripture, Guanyin has different divine roles, but is most commonly associated with bringing rain, granting fertility, and providing healing. There are a lot of other interesting stories, but I won't go further. If you're interested, I really recommend watching the TV version of Journey to the West. It's definitely easier to understand than reading the original book. To make the scene more interesting, I'll be adding a few decorations. First, place 1 or 2 small trees behind the cliff. I found this tree trunk in a park a while back, though I'm not sure what species it is. After drying and prepping it, it's finally ready to be used. I'll add small branches to the trunk using thorns. Taking inspiration from Ziyun Mountain, I've set the scene in autumn, so the rock will be adorned with yellow and red leaves. The entire platform will also be scattered with fallen leaves for a seasonal touch. Make the scene feel fuller and more dynamic, while I'll add grass to the top of the cliff. I'll place green moss in the stair crevices and stone gaps and add vines for extra detail. Here I wrote 3 characters in ancient Chinese, Ziyun Mountain. These characters date back around 3,000 years. This style of calligraphy is called Jinwen, which literally means characters on metal, since they were often engraved on bronze artifacts. I also added some unfinished statues and murals around the caves. You'd be surprised, but these unfinished caves are actually pretty common. They were usually built along trade routes, where small merchants would sponsor little sculptures, hoping for the Buddha's blessings on their journeys. In China, you can find all sorts of temples, not just Buddhist ones, but places for other religions too. During the Tang Dynasty, when Black Myth Wukong is set, all sorts of beliefs were flourishing in China, like Taoism, Indian Buddhism, Christianity from Byzantium, Manichaeism, and Zoroastrianism from Persia. You could even find temples where gods from totally different religions were worshipped, each with their own unique ceremonies. If you're up for exploring the world of Black Myth more deeply, you'll uncover tons of fascinating spots. That's a wrap for today's video. If you have any questions or suggestions about the content on this channel, feel free to leave a comment. I'm really eager to improve. And if you enjoyed what you saw, please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much. Don't forget to check out the final display, and I'll see you next time.